Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us is Congressman Marc Pocan, representing the 2nd District of the state of Wisconsin, member of the House Progressive Caucus, one of the finest members of the House of Representatives however you say that. Congressman Pocan, welcome back. You're still with us, right?
Yes, thanks, Thom.
Okay, let's pick up some phone calls here. Let's see. Tom in North Hollywood, California. Tom, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. First off, as you know, I own the glpages.com.
That's right. You're the publisher of the Gay and Lesbian Yellow Pages, and you've given us a free ad for years, and I much appreciate that, Tom. Thank you.
Well, I believe in progressive media. As you know, I believe that we the people are the government. I think we should, instead of saying the word government, should be saying we the people always in front of that. So my question actually for Mark and also for yourself, two issues that I care most about are getting money out of politics, of course. But I would like for Marc Pocan to make a commitment right here and now that he will start speaking, and you as well, Tom, each day about election fraud. And with gregpalast.com and at Greg Palast, about the number of people that have been disenfranchised, and start taking the word election fraud before Republicans try to equate that with voter fraud. It's not.
Right. You're talking about Chris Kobach's interstate cross-check system that targeted 7 million people, mostly ethnic minorities, and removed hundreds of thousands of people from the voting rolls across the swing states. One of the reasons why, according to some researchers, the reasons why there's something like 70,000 unopened ballots in Wayne County, the largely black Democratic county that Detroit is in, whereas Hillary Clinton only lost that state by 10,000 votes, that sort of thing. So that's what you're talking about, right, Tom? Just to be clear.
Absolutely, and I don't want it to just be a one-day story, but it's got to be something.
No, I got that. But asking people to make commitments to do anything is a tough one. But Tom, thank you for the call, Congressman. Your thoughts on interstate cross-check and Republican voter suppression efforts?
Yeah, so Tom, I completely agree and know where you're coming from. If we don't have our democracy, we don't have anything. And at the core of that is everyone should have a vote. When they do efforts, whether it be to purge names off of lists, whether it be to limit polling places, whether it be to stop early voting, like we've seen in places like Wisconsin, things like photo ID, you're right, that is a form of fraud. It's trying to disenfranchise people. The one fundamental problem we have, and something that Representative Keith Ellison and I have tried to address, and we're going to continue to, is we have a constitutional amendment that would guarantee explicitly a right to vote. Right now, it's inferred. They talk about discrimination in voting in the Constitution, but there's not an explicit right. And if you had an explicit right, any state like Wisconsin or any other that tries to make it harder would have to prove they're not disenfranchising the voter. Right now, you have to prove you've been somehow harmed, which is obviously a much harder burden, as we've seen state by state by state. Instead of having all these fights in the states, we need to address it at the national level. So, Tom, I'm committed to continuing to put that out there. And within that context, we talk about all of the fraud, all the efforts to try to make it harder to vote that are out there. And by doing so, hopefully, and I know it's a long-term solution when you have a constitutional amendment, we need to make sure that people understand that. In fact, interestingly, Tom, one of the things when you become a citizen, they ask you a question, and the question they ask is what your most important right as an American, and the answer is the right to vote, and yet we actually don't have it. So we need to include that. And secondly, there's no question, other than this presidential race, where we had some other factors with Donald Trump getting so much free press because of his celebrity status, almost every other election you look at, I saw the shift about 6 years ago. It used to be incumbency was the biggest way to get reelected. If you were incumbent, that was the highest rate. It turned about 6 years or so ago to being whoever raises the most money. In any other aspect of life, that is called an auction, not campaign financing. And we have to address that as well if we're going to take back these Senate seats and House seats across the country and state legislative seats in so many states.
If Greg Palast's reporting is true, and he's the guy who broke the story that Jeb Bush knocked 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls just 3 months before the 2000 election, which went viral worldwide. He was working for the BBC at the time. The BBC did that story. It was not picked up by American media in any consequential way. But nobody to this day argues against that it happened. You know, that they took this felon list from Texas, used it as a merge-purge against the voter rolls in Florida, and because African-American names, Hispanic names, and Asian names tend to be more common. There tend to be more common lumps of names than there are among Caucasians. It disproportionately threw those people off. And that, you know, got the election within stealing range for George W. Bush. So that happened, right, in 2000. Now what Greg Palast says is happening is essentially the same thing, except they're doing it in a very sophisticated, very well-funded place, this interstate cross-check system. And can you imagine, Congressman, if the Democrats figured out a way to get white middle-class and upper-middle-class men thrown off the voting rolls, and were successful at doing so with hundreds of thousands or millions of them, the hell that would come down on top of the Democratic Party. Why are the Democrats not responding to this as Tom Adler called it, you know, election fraud? I agree with that phrase. Why are the Democrats not responding to this election fraud with absolute holy hell fury?
And Tom, some of us are bringing that up. The problem is, as you know, if it doesn't get picked up often by the mainstream media, it didn't happen. I go back to my district and I tell people, if you watch the nightly news, you would think there are 20 members of Congress who really, really hate each other because that's what sells detergent, right?
Right.
But, you know, it's sometimes that's our burden in trying to get that out. I think one thing that's worth bringing up to Tom and all your listeners is I got PolitiFacted last year for saying that you're more likely to get struck by lightning than commit voter fraud. And I got one of the rare truths that they give out there because it's true. There is so little documented fraud out there that this is a complete myth. It's like the Loch Ness Monster of public policy that's put out there, and then they try to use that to then suppress the vote and to justify actions like Greg Palast is put out there. So we need to be much stronger, but we need to do it from the grassroots too, because local press is going to pick it up if it's said more in the local communities, and we can say it, but if no one picks it up from Washington, D.C., it doesn't get disseminated across the country.
Right. Okay. Mike in Los Angeles, listening on KPFK. Hey, Mike, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Congressman. And Tom, I just wanted to shine some light on a Republican talking point that surfaced a couple of weeks ago with this congressman from Michigan whose son broke his arm, but he wouldn't take him to the ER that day because it was more expensive. And the talking point is that, well, if people have a stake in their health care, they will make less expensive choices. If I had followed that sort of line on Christmas night of 2007, I would either have been dead or much more costly to treat, because I went into the ER with acute onset, severe abdominal lower right quadrant pain, nausea, vomiting.
Sounds like appendicitis.
You got it. The ER doc didn't quite see it that way. He wanted to send me home on antibiotics, which if I'd been paying the freight, I would have said, well, the doctor knows best. But I laid some more facts on him, and he said, oh, well, we'll do a CT. And it turned out to be not only an inflamed appendix, it was actually gangrenous. Mm-hmm. And if I had not gone to the ER that night, we would have had a very severe case of sepsis. Either I would have died at home in the Congress.
So, Mike, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have very little time and a lot of callers who want to get in here. Right. Your question for the congressman.
Well, I just wanted to inform him, lay out that example.
Oh, you wanted to add, okay, to the conversation. Okay.
And Mike, those are the examples that we need to put out there. The Republicans love to govern by anecdote. Anecdote fits well in 140 characters, right? What we have to do is show just the opposite. My neighbor's a nurse, and she had a similar thing at a work site. Someone who they were just going to go home, the company just kind of wanted to brush off. She insisted they go to the emergency room, and sure enough, they spent 2 or 3 days in the hospital and are probably alive today because they did that rather than what could have been minor symptoms. So while they may say that about a broken arm generally doesn't kill you, although in your case, it almost did.
Yeah, and a broken arm, can be a serious thing. And to tell a 10-year-old kid, sorry, you're going to have to just lay in bed all night long with a broken arm because I don't want to pay for the ER. That it's like sociopathy.
By the way, happy holidays, right?
Yeah, exactly. Congressman Marc Pocan taking your calls. We'll be right back with more of your calls for him.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You can check out Congressman Pocan's website at pocan.house.gov. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Congressman, all 10 lines are full. They have been all hour. I'm not sure how to fit all this in, but we're going to do our best here. Carol in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Marc Pocan.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, Tom. First of all, I just want to alert people that progressives should do something every day to forward our agenda and Bernie's agenda and the platform that the DNC came up with, a progressive platform. Today, there's a call into Congress on the issue of Medicare. It's ARA, Alliance for Retired Americans. It's the good alternative to the AARP. It came out of the union movement, and they want people to call Congress today to demand that Medicare be intact and expanded. Congressman, I have a question for you. I'm a progressive. I'm a Bernie-crat. Last night, our Bernie-crats met. We're talking about what direction we're going to go in, and we all want Keith Ellison to be the DNC chair, and we're talking about defecting from the Democratic Party if Keith Ellison is not chosen. We want to see that platform that Bernie crafted and that Hillary Clinton agreed to some parts of. We want to see that forwarded. We're not members of the DNC, so how can we make our voices heard? Who can we write to or call to influence the DNC about the chairmanship?
Great question, Carol. I'm a strong supporter of Keith Ellison. I think we need to take the movement that was created by Bernie Sanders and have it be what the Democratic Party is. That we're reaching out and having people at the grassroots, instead of going to a pharmaceutical company and saying, you gave us $100,000 last year, we need $200,000 this year. Let's raise money from the grassroots. Let's activate those grassroots to work on helping out candidates to run for office. That is the way we take it back. And quite honestly, Chuck Schumer has done a really great job of recognizing that in the Senate by putting Bernie Sanders in leadership, Elizabeth Warren, Tammy Baldwin, and other progressives. In fact, when we met with the president today, Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and Tammy Baldwin are all sitting on stage with Chuck Schumer with 5 of the people from leadership in the Senate because he recognizes that. We need the Democratic Party to recognize that. So what you can do, Carol, is find out who your DNC members are in your state. Generally, it's the party chair and the vice chair, and then it's the elected people by the state party. And reach out to them and let them know. I would do it only a little bit different, Carol. I think when you do it in a I'm going to leave the party or else, that can be fine, but I think you really need to try to aspire to their better spirits, and that might be one of the points you put out there, but I wouldn't lead with that. But I think you need those people to know that if you're really going to invigorate the party and make it a party of the people that's going to win seats in the future, we have to have a grassroots party, not a party that just appeals to the rich, wealthy, special interests.
Yeah, the I'm going to take my marbles and go home if I don't get my way. Not to criticize you, Carol. I've certainly felt that way myself before. But I get those emails from people, I'll never listen to your show again after what you said yesterday. And it's like, you don't take that as seriously as you take a reasoned argument.
Yes.
And so what you're saying, Congressman, we just have a few seconds before we're going to hit the break here. So what you're saying is that basically the two federal senators, every single member of the House of Representatives from your state. And no. Does that include the state?
Senators and House of Representatives don't vote. It's the elected DNC members from your state party, and then the state party chair and the vice chair.
So you should call the state party and ask them who these people are, right?
Absolutely, and it's probably on websites as well. Okay,
great. So check out your state party. Congressman Marc Pocan with us. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Marc Pocan taking your calls. Carol in St. Paul, Minnesota, listening on AM 950. You are on the air with Congressman Marc Pocan.
Oh, good afternoon. I have a couple of things.
Please pick one question.
The bills that are going to be passed, Congressman. Now, Sam Johnson has a bill out there that everybody can get all upset about, but Tom Price has been nominated as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I refer to Elizabeth Warren's famous words, tricks and traps. He's proposing something called balanced billing. And that could be disastrous. Not only has he proposed that he's got it backed by the AMA, the other thing he's talking about is using a budgeting process with long-term debt limits that would trigger cuts, just like the sequester did, to all programs, including Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And I am really upset that the tricks and traps are going to be set, and what's going to happen is the Republicans are going to be able to say, oh, we didn't vote for that. We never voted for that. It just happened magically.
Your thoughts, Congressman?
Yeah, and the problem is, like you said, balanced billing. It sounds reasonable, right? Everything has a reasonable name, but I can tell you the sequester happened before I got there. But the sequester is one of the worst things because what it was, they couldn't come up with a resolve to a budget fight. So they said, all right, we'll do this because the Democrats hate certain cuts, the Republicans hate certain cuts. This will surely encourage everyone to do something, and they put cuts in place that were, absolutely misguided cuts for 10 years, and sure enough, now we're living through, I think, year 4 of them, and it just cuts good programs and bad a little bit. So you don't get rid of the bad programs. You don't invest more in the good programs. You just cut everything, and it has a really devastating effect eventually. So we have to fight measures like that because sometimes it's just easy for them to do. And now that they've got both houses and the president, I think they're going to have a hard time because the Tea Party, and they're going to go for some of these easy fixes. So again, we need to activate people from the grassroots to make sure that when they hear this, we'll do our very best from the Progressive Caucus, from the Democratic Caucus, to get these things out there. But we need people to call their members of Congress. I think that should be on your speed dial, your member of Congress and your senators, and be heard often.
Yeah, 202-225-3121 or 224-3121. The numbers for the switchboard in Congress. And if you don't know the name of your member of the House of Representatives, just give me your zip code, and they will. And if you know your state, they will tell you who your 2 senators are. Brilliant. George in Chicago, listening on WCPT. George, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tim. Harry Truman, I believe, said that if a voter has a choice between a real Republican and Democrat who acts like a Republican, he'll choose the real Republican every time. And I'll be honest, I'm a frustrated and angry Democrat. I'm tired of my party taking it on the chin. We've got the smallest percentages of offices nationwide since the late 20s. I don't understand why every Democrat in the House isn't a strong member of the Progressive Caucus. Congressman, what can we do to get our fellow Democrats to become more progressive, or just get out of the party and make way for people who are?
George, I appreciate your question, especially as someone who's trying to build membership. If you have a Democratic member of Congress, ask them if they're a member, and if they're not, ask them why not. We actually are doing really well. We've got people who've been around here for a long time who are actually joining that haven't been members previously. Of the new folks, our freshman class that came in, I think we're at either one under or just one over half of the incoming freshmen have joined the Progressive Caucus.
Wow.
So we're getting a good lion's share of that. We are growing, and I think people see that we are the way back to the majority. And, I'm going to give Chuck Schumer another, recognition that's what I think he saw in the Senate when he put those folks in leadership like Bernie and Elizabeth and Tammy Baldwin. The reason he did that is he realized we're going to win if we do it from the grassroots. And quite honestly, Nancy Pelosi has always been willing to go on a more progressive policy route. I think the disconnect we saw was really at the presidential level. When, unfortunately on trade, which I think is one of the issues why we lost in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio, we needed to be much more clear that we want fair trade, not free trade, and we needed to have much better answers. My hometown used to build cars, 14,000 people, now no one does. I know why they went 13 points Obama to 1 point Trump. We need to be more clear on what we stand for, and it has to be in a progressive policy position.
Amen. Sam, listening on Sirius XM in Denver, Colorado. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi there.
Hey.
I was hoping the congressman can assure me that Keith Ellison is a take no prisoners, win at any cost DNC chairman, because that's what we need. We don't need anybody wimpy, and we need strong leadership to go to the local level and make sure that people can vote.
Yeah. Okay.
Sam, I'll tell you, I have one of my best friends and mentors in Congress is Keith Ellison. He has been amazing to work with. When we endorse someone for the Progressive Caucus, one of the provisions that Keith had implemented is he asked them to commit to raise turnout in their district by 3%. He is always thinking about the bigger picture, how to take back the majority, and he is not going to shirk to a single person when it comes to policy. Everything you want in a party chair will come in Keith Ellison, but unfortunately, it's a very small number of people that are going to make the decision. The good news is, I think people see what happened in the last election. People saw that, and they see Keith as the person who I think can keep that grassroots movement best alive, not dismissing any other candidate for it, but I think Keith is the vision that will make us a party that in 2018 can be victorious, and I think that's what we just need to make sure we contact those DNC members around the country and make sure they know that that's what people in their local areas want to see happen.
Contact your member of the
your
DNC.
member of the DNC. And I forgot to mention, Tom, there are about 35, I believe, at-large members again. So what we probably should do is maybe get you, Tom, the full list of DNC folks, and I don't know if there's a way to post it.
Do that, and I'll publicize it, and I'll put it on our website.
Thank you very much. We'll do that.
We have just a minute left in the show. Sean in Windsor, Wisconsin, you have a quick question for Congressman Pocan?
Yeah,
just a minute left in the hour.
Wondering about that 2018 governor election. Who's going to be running against Scott Walker? And is it going to be you, or is it going to be some?
Oh, look out, Congressman. 13 years ago, people started calling Bernie on the show saying, you should run for president.
Well, Sean, I appreciate the question. Right now, what I am focused on is building this progressive movement and building it back in Congress. I truly, that's why I came to Congress. That's what I want to get done. So we will have good candidates. I think what you're going to see is after the first few weeks of what the Republicans do in Congress and then watching Scott Walker release that budget, what's going on with schools and roads and infrastructure, broadband, et cetera, the DNR, our open spaces in Wisconsin, we're going to elect a Democrat governor, and we're going to make sure we have someone good run.
Yeah. Final thoughts? We have just a few seconds left, Congressman.
I really just want to emphasize again, we won yesterday because people called their member of Congress and yelled at them. And not necessarily yell in a negative way, but said, don't you dare get rid of ethics. That's like 101 of being a member of Congress. Right. We need people to call often and do the exact same thing. That's how we're going to beat them back on these policy issues.
Great. Congressman Marc Pocan, pocan.house.gov, the website. You can tweet him at Marc Pocan. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you for this.
Same here. Take care.
Really appreciate it.